All right, everybody, it looks like Susan Rice may have done goofed just a little bit. It looks like what happened here, Cernovich has talked about this, the Bloomberg View and some of these other groups. It's now spread to Breitbart, Drudge, of course. What apparently happened is that Trump was fundamentally correct when he said he was being spied on. Only he didn't realize quite the form that it took. What actually happened, and this ties into the NSA, this ties into the problem that Snowden has mentioned constantly for years now about mass surveillance, about the collection of data in regards to the espionage conducted by our intelligence agencies. Because it is espionage, well, let's face it. It's not just some family-friendly, trying to keep you safe, trademark, 2016, from them terrorists or something like that. The problem is what happened is that people, I'm going to presume, of Russian background were being spied on by U.S. intelligence agencies, and Susan Rice stepped in. This is one of Obama's inner circle sort of people. Said, we're going to unmask the identities of these U.S. citizens that have been swept up in the data collection because they've communicated with these targets and or communicated with people who did communicate with them. And of course that includes a bunch of Trump higher-ups. Now, what's the problem with this? The corporate media will declare, this is proof. Trump was colluding with the Russians. No, what it's proof of is that there was communication with people who were under surveillance. But the onus on the intelligence agencies to begin gathering this intel is so freakishly low that it could be something totally innocuous, number one. Number two, it doesn't necessarily relate to any actual political campaign. It could relate to someone was laundering money. There was some graft or something. Again, regardless of who that is. Trump getting swept up just means he was on these reports, probably because he was being mentioned in association with one or more people that were being swept up by the data gathering. So what do we know from this? Number one, Trump is correct. He was spied on by our intelligence agencies. Because if he himself was not the target of surveillance, it was just swept up by proxy because people he was associated with were communicating with targets, then he would have been wrongfully unmasked by Susan Rice and others associated with her for no actual reason. That would be point number one to make. Point number two, the corporate media is fundamentally wrong. It doesn't look like Trump was actually colluding with anyone. It was a mass dragnet for foreign targets that swept up the names of people associated with Trump. He was then mentioned in association with those individuals in these reports, unmasked, despite not apparently having actually been involved with any of this. At least that's what I'm getting from it. So, Trump has been essentially vindicated on two counts here. Who wants to bet that Michael Flynn might have been involved with maybe taking some bribes from some Russian officials or something? It's entirely possible. But that doesn't mean Trump ordered it. It doesn't mean he was aware of it going on. He was still a private citizen at the time. He was a candidate Trump, not President Donald Trump. Even if he were President Trump at the time, doesn't mean you can't micromanage everything. The same corporate media is constantly talking about, Trump micromanages too much. Well, apparently he needs to do more of that and piss them off even more because he's got to be worried about people he's associated with actually talk to some Russians. It couldn't possibly be business related. It couldn't possibly be something they were just following through with some deal they started years ago. They happened to get on the Trump campaign and made the mistake of continuing with that deal because it was lucrative. People who are in business probably do often make those mistakes. Yeah, it's probably illegal. At the same time, you think this doesn't happen with people who are running for office and their sort of staff and inner circles in Democratic campaigns or any other randomly selected Republican campaign at a federal level? I bet you anything that it does happen. So Cernovich and all of these others are now exposing, Susan Rice is the one who declared that all this info should be unmasked, but why is it necessary to do so? It seems to have kicked off a larger investigation. Wouldn't this be a misuse of the powers of her actual position, considering that Trump himself was not apparently the actual target involved? Wouldn't thus exposing him to that review simply because some associates of his were in turn caught up in that wouldn't that be a breach of some sort of ethical system there? Wouldn't it potentially be illegal as well? I'm going to say, yeah, probably. Yeah, it's probably illegal what she did. I think she's in a little bit of trouble here. At the very least, people are going to be looking into it. I think we finally figured out where all these leaks are coming from. They try to cast it off as whistleblowers. Oh, Trump White House whistleblowers. Now, that's funny. When people came forward during the Obama administration to say, oh, yeah, by the way, everyone's being spied on. You know, something that affects the average Tom, Dick, and Harry in the population. Oh, those are leakers. And by the way, Snowden fled to China, so he's also a communist espionage agent, a horrible person. Then Trump takes office. And no matter what specifically is being leaked, they're a whistleblower. All of a sudden, again, they're a hero because it has to do with the Trump campaign or the Trump presidency. Now, I like whistleblowers. I support the efforts of people within government or private business or whatever to keep government officials and people associated with them accountable. And that includes leaking info if Trump is doing something wrong or someone associated with him is doing something wrong. Yeah, I would support that. But this is all spun around by the DNC and the Obama White House. In fact, it's probably just shy of treason. Did Obama know that this was going on, that Susan Rice did this? Was he was the president of the United States? So that would be bigger than Watergate. Oh yeah, haha, we're really going to fuck up his campaign and his eventual presidency probably now. We're going to put him in these reports because other people got caught up in a dragnet and foreign surveillance or whatever involving Russia or Turkey or whatever. And then when his name is on there, because we're writing a report about how this person was on the Trump campaign or campaigning for Trump at the time or in the Trump tour bus while he was making this call that we swept up, oh, we'll just unmask Trump's identity in these reports. You know, just to defame him, even though he probably has nothing to do with what's going on. Yeah, that sounds at least mildly illegal to me. It certainly sounds unethical to me. And there's a big difference, by the way. Clinton used this defense. The Clinton campaign, when the private server stuff was happening, which didn't that involve Susan Rice too, or was that Benghazi? Actually, I think it was Benghazi. When the private server stuff was going on, how did the FBI get by with not charging her? They ruminated constantly on the ethical side of it without mentioning too much about the legal side. Because the FBI director didn't want to have to come out and say, yeah, what she did was illegal, but we're going to decline to press charges anyway. No, instead what he said was, oh, a sane, reasonable individual wouldn't have done this. It was unethical, breach of ethics, breach of protocol, and then just gloss over the it's absolutely illegal part, and she probably broke 100 different federal laws. Yeah, we're not going to charge her. And they were simply hoping that the public would forget about it after that, so that it'd become nothing more than a partisan issue. So the Trump fans, they would just get more fervorous, and they'd be like, oh, well, we need to vote for Trump so he can do something about it. And ultimately, he won't, because I don't think that Trump really wants to get that deeply involved in the intelligence agencies. They've been given such wide-sweeping power at this point that it's become probably impossible for anybody completely stellar, utterly uncorrupted individual who has never done anything wrong in their life to actually denigrate their support, to actually denigrate their powers of mass surveillance and spying and so forth. And Trump certainly doesn't rise to that level. In all honesty, he was a private businessman in New York of all places. You think he didn't stab people in the back? You think he didn't get the occasional check laundered? Of course he did. That doesn't mean that he's colluding with the Russians or that he's an espionage agent. It means he's a businessman. A businessman from the 70s and the 80s. Trust me, he's not entirely squeaky clean. That being said, I'm going to support him on this one because it looks like there was a concerted effort by the past administration through Susan Rice to defame him. That's what it's beginning to look like. This basically vindicates what he's been saying. Everyone in the corporate media, like CNN and MSNBC, are they even going to report on this crap? Yeah, probably not. Or they'll gloss it over. They'll say, oh, yeah, Susan Rice may have kind of sort of broken some obscure ethics rule, but don't worry, everyone in the public. It's nothing to worry about. You shouldn't be worried that apparently someone one step away from a sitting president decided to unmask the identities of people who were not directly targeted under mass surveillance simply because there was a presidential campaign involved. Don't worry about that. It has nothing to do with corrupting our political system. Yeah, so thanks to Cernovich and all these others for exposing that this was apparently going on. This is extremely troubling because it shows it might even be worse than Trump thought it was. He wasn't just it isn't just a case of, oh, some group conducted surveillance on me, and there's leakers in the White House or something like that. It goes further than that. It's an acting administration legit tried to screw over your presidential campaign and now is still trying to screw over your actual presidency. That's even worse. And Obama's still there in D.C. I wonder if he takes calls from Susan Rice on a weekly basis to find out how her agents are doing or something like that. I wonder. Oh, I fucking wonder if that could possibly be the case. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, it's more than just a little bit of an ethics violation here, but they'll probably try to cast it as that. They'll do what they did with Benghazi. Oh, just ignore the people who died, the lack of response and everything. Let's get bogged down in the minutia of who knew what and when. Because, oh, the event itself doesn't matter. It wasn't a national disgrace. It wasn't a breach of military protocol. It wasn't a case of Obama didn't know what the fuck he was doing or Clinton didn't know what the fuck she was doing. Just ignore all of these inconvenient points that we don't want you to think about and fixate on how it's supposedly a partisan issue because the people actually seeking to know what happened, the actual timeline, regardless of what it was, were a bunch of Republicans. So you don't have a right to know because, Clinton, she would always look out for the best interests of the U.S. public, especially embassy staff, especially in an area that Obama helped destabilize with a no-fly zone. It was a spontaneous protest. They just decided, they just got rowdy one night because of a YouTube video that we ended up taking down because it was actually probably made by a bunch of rogue CIA agents in the first place. Oh, that made them so mad they just attacked some random embassy. Okay. See, the story doesn't add up here. The Susan Rice story, the bull crap that you're getting from like CNN and MSNBC and groups apologizing for the actions of some of these Obama admins and officials as people from his era, it doesn't make sense. When things in politics don't make sense, yeah, they're usually not true. It's like when, Ted Cruz's non-apology. It's like his non-denial of cheating on his wife there, where he simply didn't justify the press enough to answer those questions. Why do you think he wouldn't answer straight up? Politicians will always answer you very, very straightly, very, very flat out if they're telling the truth. If they can actually deny something and they don't think there's even a vague possibility of getting in trouble because their denial's not true, they'll deny it straight up. When they failed to do that, when Susan Rice doesn't deny her involvement here, Hillary Clinton, beats around the bush for hours in her testimony on Benghazi or a private server, when Obama sits there and says, oh, I read about this in the news, as usual, that's a non-denial. It means that they're lying. That's about all. Peace out.